Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Malin. I read a lot of books and I try to write them as well, so I tend to do both writing vlogs and reading vlogs. So today I thought I would do a video where I wrap up everything that I have done in terms of writing last year in 2021 so that I can have a really good start at my year 2022 in terms of writing as well. So I thought I would let you guys know everything that's been going on with my writing, what I have done in 2021 and where I'm at now. So 2021 was mostly spent trying to figure out how to fix my current novel. So I have a current project that is actually fully written in terms of it is a full draft. It's about 92,800 words as it stood last time the draft was complete, and I did basically a proper line edit the first time around and that was it. I didn't do much else because I was trying to rush. I was really happy with what I had written and I wanted to get it out there. It was obviously not the right thing to do. The project in question I'm currently calling The Art of Summoning Demons. It's a young adult slash new adult type of novel because my main character is in college, she goes to university, she's 19 years old, and there's a couple of scenes that I think are getting a little bit hot and heavy and a couple of scenes that are a little bit more gore and horror type and kind of really scary, so I don't think it's a young adult type of novel. And it is fantasy, but more urban fantasy-esque with paranormal elements. There's witches, there's ghosts, there's demons, but it's not a full-on different world. It is set in our current world and all of this magical stuff is happening within our current world. So my main character's name is Olive and she goes to university for the first time for her first year with her best friend Fran. Fran really wants to join one of the sororities on campus because she's a legacy, her mom used to be in a sorority. Olive doesn't really have an interest in it, but she'll go wherever Fran goes because it's her best friend and she kind of went along even with where they went to university for Fran more than for herself. So they decide to go to this party that's at this sorority hosted by a sorority and a fraternity together, so I think they're called like mixers, and they go together with Olive's new roommate because obviously she's just found herself a new roommate as she's just arrived on campus. Her name is Vanessa. They go to this sorority party, they have fun, they meet some strange characters including a girl that is dressed in all black and very mysterious and acting a little bit haughty and weird, and she's told by this other guy, oh, that's like the head witch on campus, but she doesn't really understand that he's quite serious about it and she thinks it's a complete joke. They have this fun night, but then they go home, each to their individual dorms, Olive and Vanessa being in the same room, and in the middle of the night Olive wakes up and finds her roommate dead with her throat slit in her bed. Doors locked, windows locked, she's the only viable suspect at this point. There is something mysterious about the death obviously, but also more things happen later on that indicate more and more elements of the supernatural coming into play, and she realizes later on that there's a kind of raging war going on between two sororities on campus that are actually hiding covens of witches. Now that's all I'm gonna say because I don't want to give spoilers in case one day you want to read this novel. But that was my initial premise and that's kind of how I started my story as well, exactly in that order when I first wrote it. So I did my zero drafting or first draft, whatever you want to call it. I tend to go back and forth between writing and plotting, so in a way it was already more elaborate than if I had just written it out without any proper structure, so it wasn't that bad as some people call a zero draft, which is usually just like complete shit and then they have to rework it a lot. It wasn't that bad, so that's why I call it my first draft rather than zero drafting. When I was done with this, I was really happy with my story in a way that like made me so excited because I wrote a long time ago another story in French, which is my first language. I got it all out, it was a full novel, but it's bad. Like, it's bad and I didn't want to reread it, so I had no interest whatsoever in editing it. Well, this one, I was really excited to reread it. I enjoyed my own story, I enjoyed reading it, so I was happy to edit it, but I was way too close, it was way too soon, so I couldn't see the actual structural problems, and all I did was editing some bits here and there for the plot to make more sense, some bits here and there for the characters to make more sense, and a bit of line editing overall, and that was it. And then I was like, I'm ready for querying. No, I was not. I was absolutely not. But I still tried just a little bit. I dabbled into it, and in a way I'm happy I did, because it taught me a lot about the querying process, and now I know a little bit more than I did before. So at least there's that. And it was during this querying process that I realized the issues with my story, and mostly I think the main thing that I wanted to fix was the beginning. I had just written it out in a certain order that made sense to me, because that was the chronological order of the story. Olive goes to college, she is introduced to Vanessa, they go to the sorority party, the party goes fun, it's nice, etc. They meet people, they go home at night. Day after she wakes up, Vanessa is dead. So it was taking a little bit of time to get to this point where things generally happened, and my inciting incident was a little bit slow to start. So how I decided to fix it, well, that kind of is what happened throughout my year 2021. It took me the whole year to really figure it out, and I think I needed a proper break first. So there was quite a few months where I didn't write anything, and I just needed a break from it and just to let my story rest and have a think about it. And then when I got back into it, I knew that I wanted to fix it in terms of the first chapters and the beginning, and place the beginning at a different moment in time. So I wanted my story to start with Olive being interrogated by the cops and being asked questions about the murder of Vanessa. I also wanted to make sure there was a little bit more to indicate this was going to be a bit of a supernatural story with elements of magic. So I did add in an element that don't worry, makes sense within the story later on, of mysterious magical type of symbols written on the floor in Vanessa's blood when she finds her at first. And basically this kind of adds in that element of, oh, it's not just a normal murder story, it's not just going to be a thriller. Another thing that I changed within this is basically because originally one of the love interests and one of the main characters of the story is Sam, who is a detective who's on the case, and originally she was going to meet him a little bit later on, but now he's one of the first people that she meets at the beginning of my story, because he's one of the cops interrogating her for the murder. So the dynamic is slightly different between them at that point than it was in my first draft, and so I needed to make sure that when I'm rewriting or revising, everything makes sense within this first meeting. Like, they keep that dynamic that I restarted, and the dialogues need to change a little bit, and the way that he speaks to her changes a little bit, and all that. So that was another thing that needed fixing. And then same with another character who's kind of the other love interest. It's basically, originally she was gonna be taken to the doctors at the hospital after the murder to be checked out, because she also has blood on her. So originally she was gonna meet Art, who's another of the guys in the story, at the hospital right after she's been taken from the murder scene, right after she's discovered Vanessa's body and all that. But I wanted to change that. Obviously it changed my beginning, and I didn't have a scene where she went to the hospital anymore. I didn't have that scene. So I decided to just remove Art from the hospital and make him the campus doctor instead. And so when she is getting bullied at some point by some people and gets thrown on the floor, she goes to the campus doctor to get checked out, and that's Art, and that's how she meets him. So a little bit different, but they're still linked together because the two characters of Sam and Art know each other and are friends, and so I still managed to make that connection somehow within my fixed chapters. So yeah, that's kind of how long it took me to fix all this. It was a year, mostly because my writing habits were really sporadic. I didn't have a consistent schedule, I wasn't really writing every day. It was more like here and there I had bursts of motivation and suddenly I wanted to write a lot, and then moments where I didn't write at all for several months in a row. So it was very slow going, but I think I've managed to fix the majority of the things that I really wanted to properly rewrite. So starting my year 2022, I started at the beginning of the year with not very much to fix anymore. So I'm participating in this January Remo challenge. I will explain a little bit in the second part of this video, but basically I'm trying to write every day at the moment, and it is going much faster because I've already done the big structural fixes, and now I'm just making sure that everything makes sense within those fixes. And I think that's actually because towards the end of the year, as usually in December, I tend to suddenly write a little bit more. I have a little bit more free time. I'm finally off work for a couple of weeks. Even just the act of going home to Brussels, seeing my parents and being in a different environment sometimes makes me more motivated to actually get some writing done. So I think although I had a pretty bad year in terms of overall writing, towards the end of the year, I got there in the end. What else did I write in 2021? Because this main project, The Art of Summoning Demons, was taking me a long time to fix and understand, because it was like a new beast and I needed to wrap my head around it, because it took me some time to get that done. I also didn't want to just be editing. I didn't want to only be fixing and reworking a project that was already existing and not having any of my new ideas out on paper. So I've had a lot of new ideas and I wrote them all down. I actually use Notion a lot now, so I have like a dedicated page on Notion where I put all of my different ideas in different like little squares, and then in there they're each a separate page and have like any information I had about that new idea. One of them I did start on. It is currently called the Night Shifter series because I had this idea that would span more than one book, but not in the same way that The Art of Summoning Demons would, because I think of The Art of Summoning Demons as a potential duology or trilogy. Like, I definitely see Olive having more adventures with the same group of friends and everything, and I already know what I want to do for my second book, which is going to be a lot more of a deep dive into her grandfather's secret society, which would make a lot more sense if I explain some more, but I'm gonna just leave it at that and keep it a surprise. But basically my other book idea, the Night Shifter series, I see more as a series where each book would be its own individual story with its own individual characters, and they may be linked together, but every single book would be about a different pair of characters, basically. And yeah, I kind of want it to be a little bit more of a romance series as well, but still within that paranormal, supernatural, urban fantasy kind of universe. However, I'm seeing that series a lot more from an adult point of view. I don't think it would be as much of a young adult. It would potentially still be new adult / adult this time. Because my main character already in this story is an adult who is out of university. She's within her first 2 years of her first job, so she is working a job somewhere. She doesn't own, but she lives in a flat with flatmates and all that. It's a lot more adult, I think, in terms of the topics that the main character would have to deal with. So the Night Shifter series, I kind of see it as like a little bit of a supernatural urban fantasy take on the movie The Losers in a way, because that movie has a cast of characters that are all experts in what they're doing, and together they're this type of military team. I wanted my cast of male characters to be very similarly taken, like a bunch of guys together working into a sort of military team. However, I wanted it to be in the urban fantasy universe that I was creating in my head. So I have a few of the male characters already in my head, and I think one of them is going to be like a panther shifter, and he's also going to be the sniper. I also want one of them to be like a demon who uses fire as his main power, but my main character in the first book, the leader of the gang, would be Dane, and his power is basically he's a gargoyle, so he can pretty much become an actual rock. And I haven't figured out exactly how his powers would work, but that's kind of what he is in terms of who he is, what kind of creature he is. And then on the other side, my main female character, who's going to be my main first POV, because I want this series to be 2 POVs each book, so like each book has the POV of the woman and the POV of the man, if that's the romance I'm going for. I definitely think that I could also write in the future potentially some sapphic romance, but I don't see myself writing men gay romance, because I don't know how I would go around that, considering that I'm not a man, and it's hard enough, I find it at least hard enough already to write from the POV of a guy, which I'm sure will come with practice and all that, but at the moment this is what I can see myself do realistically. So the way that I'm seeing the series is that I would have 2 POVs, which would be the 2 romantic interests, but I also think that I'm not great at writing pure romance. I don't think that's my gig at all. I think it would be a lot more about the supernatural story that each book would have. And I think that's what pretty much is how I started The Art of Summoning Demons as well. In my head I was like, I want to write a romance, and like I had a lot of ideas about how I would do that. And then I started writing it and it became just like a supernatural thriller type of story. I was like, yeah, okay, I think that's more my vibe, and I'll integrate some romance into it. My main female character at the moment, her name is Clem, and she lives in London, and she has some sort of power that allows her, well, it's not a power, she's always seen it as a curse, but she realizes later on it has other ramifications that tend to make it into a power. But originally she had this affliction, which is that she would just be drawn towards death. So anything that had died recently, she would be drawn towards it, unable to stop herself but to walk in that direction and find a dead body. So it started small when she was younger with like animals and stuff, and then one day she found like the lair of a serial killer, and that's when her parents were like, we're done, you deal with your own life, we don't want anything to do with you, and kind of left her to her own device. And so that's kind of her backstory when she first gets kidnapped. And she gets kidnapped because she can kind of control death, and she's actually like one of the last necromancers. And she has this strong link towards dead bodies, but also vampires, who are technically dead bodies walking. And that's why she has some sort of control over the vampires, and she's kidnapped by this vampire lord who is realizing that she's the last one of her kind and wants to get rid of her, and wants to potentially use her for his own device. So that's kind of how it starts, and our team of military experts, supernatural military experts, is hired to find her and get her back, basically, by this other vampire who I'm gonna consider is a good vampire compared to the other guy. So that's kind of the main premise of it, and it's really fun to write because I kind of went into it thinking this is definitely gonna be a self-published book. I don't know how that would be traditionally published, it could be, don't know, but I kind of went into it with a little bit less expectations, and so it's just easier to flow and faster to write. However, I only just started it last year, and I did take a big break when I started rewriting more of my draft for The Art of Summoning Demons, so I haven't started that much of it. So I have about 10k, that's how much I've written of that project, but I have written a lot more in terms of the structure. It's not complete, but what I've been doing is I'm using a lot of this book a lot of the time, the 22 steps to becoming a master storyteller. So it's called The Anatomy of a Story, but basically in there are actually 22 steps within a story. And so I'm using that book as kind of my structure for this. So I've put it in Scrivener, a lot of the different steps, and I'm trying to fill them in as I go, and that's gonna fill in my chapters. So this is the first time that I'm working this way, and it's just a completely different way from the way that I wrote The Art of Summoning Demons. But I'm just experimenting, and I think each project might be different, or I'm just finding myself as a writer, and one day I'll have it refined and I'll know exactly what my process needs to be. So this is the third part of this video, and I want to talk a little bit about writing friends. So around mid-year in 2021, I started joining this Discord writing group with a couple of friends, with people that I had met on Instagram who were also writing and really keen to get their novels fully out and fully fleshed and all that. So I was really happy to join this group. However, since then it did die down and no one really writes in it anymore, but it started strong. And I was really happy originally to join this group. So although it died down in the end and, you know, didn't continue, I did manage to write a lot and fix a lot of my issues with The Art of Summoning Demons thanks to that group, because we had a couple of workshops at one point where people would submit their first chapter, and people would go on the Discord or on Zoom and kind of do a call to work on that first chapter and say like what they liked about it, when they'd read it, what they didn't like so much, how they think we could fix it, all that. And I did do that with my first chapter, and I rewrote it around that time just for that group, just for that workshop. So it really pushed me to finally get back into the game and finally rewrite and fix the issues in my story. I think just having other people review your work, because it was the first time that I had complete strangers reviewing my work. Before that I had only ever shared my work with a couple of friends, and that was about it. So it felt good to know that my writing style wasn't complete rubbish. As someone whose first language is in English, writing in English can be really scary, and it's always worrying me that my writing style is just never going to be on par with someone else whose first language is English. So it was nice to have a little bit of validation and to feel like my first chapter had a shot. And then after the group died down, the girl who had founded it, she was still on Instagram doing a couple of live sprints for writing on Instagram. So I joined a couple of those, and especially towards the end of the year, that really helped me to actually get some writing done as well, because it was just setting time aside to do this, and I wanted to show up. And it taught me really, this is one thing that I learned in 2021, that I was putting too much pressure on myself in terms of writing. Like before that, when I wrote the first draft, I was like, I'm writing this many words that day, this many words that day, and I was getting it done. And it worked the first time around, but then I felt burnt out afterwards. Well, in reality, if my only goal, my only criteria for succeeding is showing up, like just showing up, even if you write nothing, you've done research and that's it during that session, or even if you write like 15 words and that's it, you showed up. That's how it works. That's what makes me actually write and enjoy writing, is just the act of being like, all that matters is that I showed up. So that's something I learned last year as well. And I think I learned that as well thanks to those sprints and thanks to trying different things, different methods to write. And then towards the end of the year, I discovered this channel, The Troublemakers. I think I was watching a live show and they mentioned that channel that was going to do NaNoWriMo, which is basically like NaNoWriMo. If you don't know what NaNoWriMo, it's National Novel Writing Month, and it's basically this month during which people try to write 50k. It's so official now because so many people have been doing it that it has its own website and forums and everything for people to participate. The idea is within 1 month you write a 0 draft because it's going to be rubbish. It's 50k. Within 1 month, it's probably going to be rubbish. A lot of people participate in that, but I've never been able to. First of all, I always forget it's going on until it's midway through November. And second, it's also not a good month for me. Work-wise, I'm very, very busy in November. The business that I work in is seasonal, and towards November it's hard. So instead, these people who must have felt the same way decided to do a January writing month. And same goal, not sanctioned by NaNoWriMo, just an individual thing, but also with Google Sheets to like track word counts every day and see other people's progress, and a Discord channel with a big writing group where people are talking through it, doing writing sprints throughout the month of January, all of that. So I joined this group towards the end of the year, so I'm still counting it as a 2021 win, even though I've mostly been writing with them in 2022. But basically, it's been really, really good to meet other people who are like-minded because they're also writers. None of my real-life friends are writers, and as far as I know at least, and I think it's really fun to be able to talk to other people who are going through the same struggles, also have daytime jobs and are also trying to write full novels at the same time. And it's just so much more motivating to have that kind of group at the same time to like support you. Now, what's coming up in 2022? So, like I just said, I started NaNoWriMo, and that's going to continue throughout the month of January. However, I'm not using it in a completely honest way, in the sense that I'm doing a 3rd draft technically. I don't know if my 2nd draft counts as a 2nd draft because it was mostly line editing. So let's say it's my 2nd draft now. So I'm rewriting a lot, but I'm also using a lot of the words that I had already done before. And some of them are still really good. So like I have chapters where I don't need to rewrite all that much at all. I can just copy and paste and just reread, make sure it makes sense. Others, rubbish. Others, I have actually deleted 2 chapters already, and so I had to rewrite those scenes within other chapters because they weren't good enough to be actual scenes. And I'm also like, some chapters I have to fix a lot more. Some of them I didn't spend that much time on them, or like they feel more rubbish, or they're not correct anymore, like they don't fit in anymore with the fixes that I've had for my first chapters. The other thing that I might try to participate in, today is actually the 9th of January, and on the 12th, I think, there's a thing that opens which is submissions for the Author Mentor Match program. And this is a program where people get matched with a mentor that's going to help them through their already written draft. So you need to have a draft that's full in order to get it ready for querying. And I think it could be really useful for me if I manage to get through it. Obviously, there's so many people that are going to participate. I could very much not be one of the people who they're interested in, or the story that I have might not match anyone's wishes for manuscript. So I'm not saying that if I don't get it, I'm going to feel sad about it. Like, I won't feel like that means it's bad. I'll just probably understand, oh, maybe they just had better matches. So I'm gonna try to get through that, which means I'm trying to get as much done as possible before that date in terms of rewriting stuff. The other thing I'm doing as well in terms of social media actually is, first of all, I'm gonna try and be better and more consistent with writing vlogs on this channel. I'm gonna try and do more of them and just have them out every month at least. And then I also started a TikTok, which I've only posted one that had something to do with writing so far, which is just introducing my story and just kind of like in terms of the aesthetic of it and just some keywords of what's going on within my story. So I'm gonna put it in here. So that's the TikTok that I posted, and I'm hoping to do more. I want to try and get a little bit more active on TikTok, but the platform is really scary and I don't know it very well yet, so I'm figuring it out as I go. And then finally, the last thing I wish to do in 2022 with my writing is that I want to get back into the querying stage with the art of summoning demons. I want that to happen in 2022, and I think past this year, if it's not happened, if it's not worked out, I'm gonna self-publish it. Like, I want to have this book out, and I think I enjoy myself when I reread my stories, so it can't be that bad. Like, it has to please someone, it has to make someone happy to read it. So I'm thinking if it's not gonna go through this growing process this year, then next year I will self-publish it. And that's it. That's all the news I had for my writing in 2021, and I hope that you enjoyed this little recap, this catch up on everything. If you did, please leave a like, leave a comment down below. I'm always going to try to respond to anyone's comments, so feel free to ask me any questions about it. And I guess if you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing, ring that bell, all that jazz, and I will see you guys in the next one.